we're fortunate that all of you on the panel today sort of bracket the country from East Coast, West Coast, and it raises the issue that you'd be well, I think, prepared to address of predisposing regional variation and patient characteristics in various regions and how that affects the incidence of diabetes and the other comorbid conditions. Who wants to jump in on that one first?
Well, I think it's fairly apparent from the statistics that where you find obesity is where you find more diabetes. So the south, southeast portions of the country, which have the highest obesity rates, have the highest incidence of diabetes too. You also have other areas of the country where you have subsets of populations that are more predisposed. So Arizona, though their lifestyle and obesity rates are not the same as they are in the Southwest, because of their Native American population has an increased predisposition to diabetes. Populations that have a lot of, or areas that have a lot of Polynesian populations tend to have a fairly high rate of diabetes among that subset. So that geography does play a role, but I think the key thing there is that diabetes tends to follow obesity.
And I think to that point, I think it's a timeline. So it's true, it can start in the Southeast, and it may start in Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia, and then it goes to West Virginia, but then you go up to Michigan, and then you go down to New Mexico, and then you go to Washington State, for example. What you see is a lag. So Washington State today is maybe where Mississippi was 8 years ago. And so we have now got states where they've got 30% obesity and maybe 13% diabetes. Now, the other states that look pale compared to them actually are at the same place where they were 5 years ago, 8 years ago.
We're all on the road.
Oh, and you can see the maps.
We are, although there are certain aspects of different demographics and geographies that will dictate to some degree that won't continue, not every state will continue on the same trajectory. Certainly if Utah, for instance, where I'm at, we're like the 6th least obese state in the country. And yet we're a very young state, and we also have activity is a very high focus of people. Whereas in the South, and also it depends upon the foods you're eating. You look at the South and what they eat for food, it contributes to the obesity because they're eating foods with high glycemic index, very fatty foods. Whereas you go to California, Colorado, some of these other places where people are much more active outdoors in a physically demanding way, not just hunting, boating, and fishing, or alligator chasing.
Not that there's anything wrong with hunting, boating, fishing, and alligator
I tell you
chasing.
what, I'd get a workout chasing alligators, or them chasing me, one or the other.
Sometimes you eat the alligator, and
sometimes the alligator eats you.
But you know, part of the issue is also the ethnicity. We talked about different ethnic groups and where they come from, and then you find, for example, people that comes from India, okay, Far East Asia, for example. When they come to this country, it depends where they sit, and they do have explosion of diabetes. So therefore, for example, you go to Minnesota and you find communities of people from India, for example, and you see higher rate of diabetes. You go to Michigan, you've got a huge amount of people in, let's say, the Detroit area come from the Middle East. They've got a huge amount of diabetes. So it's beyond a state like Utah, which is by far more homogeneous than other states.
Yeah. You raise one issue, and I know we're going to move along, but I can't let this one just lay on the table unasked, which is we always hear that when people come to the United States and eat as Americans, they get sick as Americans do. So this 1/3 of all Americans with diabetes, how does that compare worldwide?
Pre-diabetes.
Pre-diabetes. Yeah, how does that compare worldwide?
So let's take numbers. The country with the most diabetes today in the world is China. They have now 92 million people with diabetes. It's still, quote unquote, only maybe 7% of population. But if you think what happened in China 15 years ago, this number is just unbelievable. What you have in the United States is what you will see in 10 years from now in China, what you're already seeing in India, what you see in the Philippines. So we are seeing that this Western and maybe technology and better lifestyle, it's all coming to those countries. Used to be first or second generation, immigrants to this country were the ones who displayed it. You don't need to. They got it in their own countries now.
And that's too bad.
And have we introduced it with, fast food that's now?
It's part of it is the fast food, but I also believe in technology. How many years it took us to go from walking to a horse to then riding your Mercedes, right? How many years did it take us? When you go there, they go directly from bicycles to a nice car. And all of a sudden, they jump 10 generations in a short time.
So
and I think
everything
that's
gets
part
accelerated.
of it.
Which brings us to